everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley, and today I'm going to be kicking off a vlog where I will be reading and watching my best friend's Exorcism. It may be surprising, but I have not yet read My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, and with a movie coming out on Amazon at the end of this week, I thought it was the perfect time to finally read the book, watch the movie, and just take you through my experience with both and then let you know how they compare. I'm not the biggest Grady Hendrix fan, like a lot of horror lovers are. I have read the book club's guide to slaying vampires, and I thought it was okay, and I tried to read Horror Store, but I couldn't really get into it, and I'm pretty sure that's all I've read from Grady Hendrix so far. This has always been on my radar because this cover is amazing. I just absolutely love how it looks like an old VHS tape. It's so unique, it's so beautiful. It's just something that I wanted on my shelves. And so with the movie coming out, it was the perfect excuse to finally pick it up and give it a read. It's also a wonderful floppy paperback. I really appreciate just the way this feels on my hands. But anyways, I don't know a ton about this book. I have heard a lot of people talk about it, a lot of people love it, but a lot of people just widely love Grady Hendrix things, and I haven't felt that connection to his writing before, so I don't really know how I'm going to feel about this personally. I do believe this is a horror comedy, and I also believe it is a young adult book, or at least a coming of age type story that follows a young adult cast, so pretty much a young adult horror book. But I don't expect it to be like other young adult horror books that I've read. I don't know if it's because it's Grady Hendrix. I don't know if it's because of the cover of this. I'm just expecting this to feel a little bit more adult with the themes, but maybe following a young adult cast. I'm not really sure. I really don't know what to expect. So it's really going to be a journey taking you through my first experience with this book and then watching the movie adaptation to see how they are, how I like them, if I like them at all. Truly all I know about this is you're following these teens and one of them gets possessed, I believe. I don't know if it's going to actually be a possession or if it's going to be like a fake out possession and it's kind of like a metaphor, or it could be both. I really don't know. So I'm gonna be reading this. We're gonna keep it non-spoilery the entire time. If I do decide to go into spoilers, don't worry, I will put a spoiler bar on the screen whether I'm talking about the book or the movie or anything. I feel like I might want to talk about spoilers to get into specifics if things change, but if you don't want any spoilers, you're totally gonna be able to watch this with no spoilers. There will be a very clear warning on the screen, so you don't have to worry about that. But the first step is reading the book. The movie's not out yet, so I have a couple of days to catch up and read this. I'm going to be reading it both physically and on audio because I did get the audio through my library, so I want to give both a chance for the reading experience, and I will check in with you when I have some initial thoughts about the book and a little bit of a better sense of what the synopsis of the book is. All right, so I have reached the 100-page mark in this book, so I thought that would be a good place to do a first update. It's about this far into it. This copy has around 320 pages in it, so I'm about 1/3 of the way through the book. This is more YA than I was expecting it to be. It does feel like a YA story, which is totally fine. I like YA, I like YA horror. It's just, for some reason, I guess because this cover's so creepy, I was expecting it to be a little more dark and scary from the offset and have a darker tone, but it does have a young adult tone. You're following these two girls who are best friends, Abby and Gretchen. Abby is really into ET. She's throwing a birthday party, an ET themed birthday party, and none of her classmates show up because another girl was doing a horseback riding party on the same day, but Gretchen shows up, and then Gretchen becomes her best friend, and so it follows them through the first couple of years really quickly as you're introducing their friendship. They end up becoming friends with these other two girls, Margaret and Glee, and the four of them are just having a good time being teenagers. They decide to do some drugs. They also decide to do some skinny dipping, and then the night goes wrong. Gretchen goes missing. They can't find her, and then when they do find her, she is seemingly changed, and she is having all these weird things happening to her, and so that is introducing this possession of Gretchen. Reading the synopsis of this, Abby is going to be investigating what's going on with Gretchen, and it will lead to some startling discoveries, and by the time their story reaches its terrifying conclusion, the fate of Abby and Gretchen will be determined by a single question: is their friendship powerful enough to beat the devil? So I do think this is an actual possession story. So far, I don't have particularly strong feelings about it. I feel like the writing is fine. It does have a lot of just 80s feel to it. Each chapter starts with a song title from an 80s song. There's lots of 80s references of pop culture things going on at the time. I was not alive in the 80s, so I can't let you know if it feels like being back in the 80s, but it just feels like what I know of the 80s. So that's fun. It also feels very summery. I feel like this is a good book to close out summer, so I'm glad I'm reading it. I feel like it's technically fall at this point, but not where I live. It's still pretty hot, so this is a good book to read in the summer from what I've seen so far. And I'm interested to see what happens happens with Gretchen? What are these discoveries that we're going to discover with Abby? I don't know. But I do feel like this is going to be a story that really closely follows their friendship. And I do love friendship stories, especially in horror and especially with this coming of age moment between that two, because there's just so many complex dynamics between female friendships, especially when you are a teenager. It is interesting that this is written by a man. It's written by Grady Hendrix. So I'll be interested to see if he can really capture that experience of what it is to be a teenage girl with female friends, because there's just a lot to unpack there. So I'm interested to see where it goes. But so far, no strong feelings yet. The story's really still kind of just being set up. We've just kind of reached that tipping point where now I'm going to see what it goes into. I'm going to see how dark it really gets. It's not that creepy yet. Like there's some creepy things. There was a little bit of creepy imagery that kind of freaked me out, but nothing overwhelmingly scary about it yet. It's pretty light horror so far. I hope it gets darker. I would love for it to get darker. I would love for the vibes of this cover to be what I'm getting in the story. So TBD, we'll see, but I'm gonna read another 100 pages or so and I will check in with you then. I believe I told you I was gonna update you in another 100 pages, but I actually just went ahead and finished the whole rest of this book. I also was editing the last clip and I think the face on this book cover tricks my camera and it tries to adjust to this. So I'm just gonna put an image of the book cover here so that the focus doesn't mess up. But I have a lot of thoughts, so I do wanna let you know my final thoughts on the book. And then the movie did come out today, so I'm gonna watch it later tonight and then I'll let you know what I think about the movie after that. As for the book, I did not end up loving it as much as a lot of people who do love it do. I feel like people who love this book really passionately love this book, and I really don't hear a lot of people talk about not enjoying the book. I personally ended up having a fine time with the book. I thought it was good, okay, but it wasn't something that's going to be a personal favorite of mine. I do think there are a lot of things to like about it. It just wasn't exactly the story that I was looking for, and it didn't really end up doing a whole lot for me, but I do think I'm gonna enjoy a movie adaptation of it. I think that'll be fun just to have the overall 80s aesthetic to the movie, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. As for the book, the reasons why I just didn't passionately love it is mainly related to the fact that I didn't get super connected to the characters personally. This is very much a character-driven story. It is a story about friendship and the resiliency of friendship, and it really does that very well. I think everybody in the world needs a friend like Abby. That girl is the best friend to Gretchen that you're ever gonna find. She was willing to put up with literally anything to help Gretchen. And the ending scene, oh my gosh, iconic. Like, wow, what a good friend Abby was. And it's really hard to explain when you just don't connect to characters why sometimes. I mean, I don't even really know how to put my finger on it, but I just wasn't incredibly invested in them as characters. So it just didn't pull as much on my heartstrings. The ending does have a nice little somber moment to it, and I've heard some people say they cry at the ending of this. I didn't cry, but I was like, ooh, yeah, that hits. So that's not even really a critique of the book. I just personally didn't get into this one as much, and it did feel kind of long and repetitive because of that. I didn't feel like a lot of new things were happening. It was really just this whole long story about Abby and Gretchen's friendship, Abby really trying to save Gretchen, Abby learning things, people coming into their lives that are doubting what's going on, and Abby just being a really resilient friend who stood by her friend until the very end. For some things that I did enjoy about the book, overall, I thought the atmosphere was a lot of fun. I also just liked the creative writing choices that are in the book. Like there's this segment where it keeps popping in the little quizzes that you would have in magazines growing up, like the multiple choice questions about your friendship. So I liked those fun, creative, stylistic choices with the writing. I did really like the friendship between Abby and Gretchen and just how good of a friend Abby was. And I also like, and I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this book, so maybe this is something that is very well talked about with this, but when I haven't read a book that's really well read that a lot of people have read, I try to avoid hearing too much about it because I still want to be surprised. So I'm gonna have to go listen to other people's reviews and see what other people are saying about the book. But for me personally, this very much felt like and history will say they were roommates kind of story, where back in the 80s it wasn't as acceptable for women to be in same-sex relationships, and it definitely felt like they had a little semi-romantic sort of love. I mean, it's definitely a platonic love between what's explored in the book, but it did feel like the kind of story that was trying to hint towards potential like love and romantic connection between them as well that they just weren't able to explore, and then the sort of tragedy behind that. So I thought that was a really interesting element of the story as well. And then, like I said, my favorite part is probably the big climax of the story, not necessarily the very ending of the story, because we do see some fallout and resolution from that moment, but the climax scene was so iconic. I cannot wait to see that played out on the screen. I hope they really fully go for it because that was so much fun to read, and I feel like it's gonna be really fun to watch. I haven't really read a lot of possession, exorcism type stories or really seen a lot. I mean, there's The Exorcist, and then other than that, like here and there, there's those types of scenes in movies or whatnot, but I haven't really read a full-on possession story, and so that was just really, really fun. So overall, I had a good experience with the book. It just wasn't a personal favorite of mine. I would recommend this book because so many people do love it. And I'm kind of trying to move away from rating books, I think. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't really think I want to use star ratings a ton unless it's a very clear 5-star, then I'll probably say that. But otherwise, I'm just gonna tell you, like, I overall pretty much enjoyed this book, but I just didn't personally love it, so take with that what you will. Now I'm super excited to watch the movie tonight. I can't watch it right now. I'm gonna have to wait until this evening to watch it, but I'm super excited to pull it up, see what it's like. I haven't even watched a trailer for this movie, so I'm going in totally surprised just to see how they adapt it, and I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, so I just finished the movie, and the ending in particular left me with a lot of thoughts. Overall, I would say that the movie stays pretty true to the book. They don't make any big changes, but they make a lot of small changes throughout, which I think are more just to do with what they felt comfortable adapting in a film. I wonder if some of it had to do with the rating of the film. I don't know if it was like PG-13 or what it was, and if other scenes from the book that got changed around in the movie were for the purpose of keeping the rating where it's supposed to be or keeping it more young adult, but there were some things that just got switched around quite a bit in the nature of like bad things that were happening to the cast of characters. But overall, the plot stays pretty similar, the characters stay pretty similar. And as far as an adaptation goes, of taking the material from the book and making it work on screen, overall, I think they did a good job of that. As far as the casting and the actors and how they did, I thought the casting was good. I thought the character who played Gretchen did a particularly good job playing a possessed teen. I was very impressed by that performance because that can easily just come off really silly or goofy, and I thought overall she did a really good job playing that role. And I did kind of get more of a sense of humor from the movie than I did from the book, and I think that has to do more with a personal thing. I talk about this quite a bit, but I have so much trouble enjoying horror comedy books or like funny thriller, cozy mystery, funny type of books, but I love that in movies and TV shows. Like Cabin in the Woods is one of my favorite horror movies. I love shows like Dead to Me or iZombie or Santa Clarita Diet. I really love stuff like that when I'm watching it, but it's hard for me to enjoy reading it. And so that may just be a personal thing, but it did feel funnier to me in the movie form than it did necessarily in the book. And I liked the humor of the movie. I am kind of curious how I would feel just watching this movie, not knowing anything about this, not having read the book. I think I probably wouldn't really have liked it because it just feels sort of dumb when you're watching it. I don't really mean that in a bad way, but it just kind of does feel sort of dumb, and especially with how they end the movie versus how they end the book. Like when the book ends, it feels more emotional and powerful and even brings out some more of the themes of the story and friendship and just life. But when the movie ends, you're just like, that's it. This is where we're stopping things. So I do want to go into spoilers a little bit so I can explain that more clearly, but I'll do that once I get to the end. As far as other non-spoilery things, I liked what they did with the atmosphere of the 80s, the clothing, the hair, the music that was playing. I have a little nitpicky thing about when one of the particular songs doesn't play in the movie when they sing it in the book that I thought was a really creepy use of the song I Think We're Alone Now that was done really well in the book that they did not do in the movie. They did play that song, but they played it like right at the beginning of the movie in the background. I was like, oh no, this probably means they're not gonna do the thing, and they didn't do the thing. But I would have never remembered that if I had read this book more than even a week ago, but because I literally just finished the book and then turned the adaptation on, it was kind of fun to see those exact little differences. But overall, like the setup, the atmosphere was all good. I will say this is a very clearly YA horror comedy movie. The closest thing I could kind of compare it to while watching the film, thinking about, okay, if people didn't read the book and they're kind of wondering if they should watch the movie, if it's going to be something they enjoy, it kind of reminds me of, for an older example, the show iZombie with that sort of tone to it. And then for a more recent example, it also sort of reminded me of the show Boo Bitch, which I really enjoyed and had a good time with. And I think that's a pretty good example too, because that is also a story about female friendship. So that's a pretty good comparison point. But this being set in the 80s instead of modern day, it doesn't have as many modern culture references. It has more 80s culture references. So if you're looking for like an 80s version of Boo Bitch, but it's a possession story instead of a ghost story, then definitely would recommend checking this out. As far as if you need to read the book first before watching the movie, I don't think you do. I rarely think you need to read a book first to watch the movie or vice versa. If you want to do both, I would plan on reading the book first and then watching the adaptation, just because that's always how I recommend things. I think it's more fun to read it first and imagine it in your head and then see how it really plays out. But if you do see the movie and you feel unsatisfied in the ending, I do think you should explore what the ending in the book was if you didn't read the book, because I liked the ending in the book better. So that's what I'm going to talk about next in spoilers. So if you don't want to hear spoilers about the ending of the movie and the book, then go ahead and skip past where you don't see the spoiler bar section anymore. But that is the one thing that I wanted to talk about in spoilers. So the one thing I have that I really like better in the book than in the movie is when the exorcism scene is happening throughout the end of the book, really starting around where the book is at 308, page 308 in this copy of the book. So there's really not a lot left of the story at this point. It's very, very much the end of the book and the movie. But I really liked in the exorcism scene in the book the way that Abby gets really emotional about their friendship and trying to save Gretchen. And then there's just this really iconic moment where she just hears like drums beating in her head, deep, deep down, so deep that at first she couldn't hear them over the obscene whispers, but then they were there faintly, and something in Abby's heart kicked over. Inside her skull, a piano and a guitar were banging, and her heart began to beat with the sound of hundreds of roller skates. And then she just starts singing We've Got the Beat, just like really stretched out. It's like the voices paused just for a second and the drums got louder. We got the beat, Abby whispered, then louder. We got the beat, we got the beat. The voices stopped, the touching stopped, but then it resumed with a vengeance. And then she's just going on, and then she ends up exorcising the demon out of her friend by saying all of these things that were meaningful to their friendship. So how in exorcism movies and books, it's always like the power of Christ compels you. Abby is saying, like, by the power of Phil Collins, I rebuke you. By the power of Phil Collins, who knows that you coming back to me is against all odds, in his name I command you to leave this servant of Genesis alone. By the power of the thorn birds, by the sacred strength of my sweet Audrina and forever, I deny and rebuke you. By the power of lost retainers and Jamaica and bad cornrows and fireflies and Madonna, by all these things I rebuke you. By the mysteries and the power of good dog Max and E.T., the extra terrible, and Geraldine Ferrero, the first lady vice president ever, by the eye of the tiger, the love cry of the koala bear, like just all these things, just such this iconic friendship moment. She's like, I love you, Gretchen Lane, you are my reflection and my shadow, and I will not let you go. We are bound together forever and ever until Halley's Comet comes around again. I love you dearly and I love you queerly, and no demon is bigger than this. And it was just like this really iconic, wonderful moment. And this is the moment that I was most excited to see portrayed in the film. And in some ways it did do that. Specifically, she didn't mention Good Dog Max because that was not a part of the movie. The whole thing where Gretchen ends up killing her own dog, they completely took that out of the movie, which I thought was interesting. And you don't really get the explanation of why E.T. is important to them and how that is what kicked off their friendship. I can't remember if they mildly mentioned it, but you don't see the beginning years of their friendship play out in a montage like I was hoping you would see, because you really get this montage of the first few years of their friendship in the book. And I really wanted to see that, but you didn't get to see that. But anyway, she mentions a couple of these things, and she does say I love you, but you don't get all these elements. You don't get this mention of Halley's Comet, which becomes important at the end of the book. And then she ends up stabbing Gretchen, which I don't remember happening in the book. Yeah, I don't think it does. She just ends up getting the demon out of her, and then the cops show up, and then it becomes this big deal. And then there's this whole cycle of events that happens after this, where this fitness bro Christ dude who is helping her lead this exorcism ends up getting arrested for this, and then she feels so guilty over that. And then in the last couple of pages it talks about the rest of their lives and years over years, and Gretchen had to move and how they weren't allowed to call each other, but Gretchen went out to go see Abby against her parents' will, and then the parents were finally whatever, we'll just let them start writing to each other, and how sometimes in life they were closer than others and they drifted apart and were together, and how that's just the difficulties of life and friendship, and how they got through this huge big terrible thing, but it's almost like the real monster is like life pulling you apart from one another. And that's the devastating thing about friendships, is you just grow apart from people. And then the ending of the book, like the last 2 pages, is so sweet. And you're just seeing them be together for each other at the end of their lives. Gretchen being like the only one that's there for Abby now. And they're just reflecting on their lives and talking about Haley's comet. And, you know, are they going to be able to see it again when it comes around the next time? And the last paragraph and the last sentence is so good. And it says, Abby Rivers and Gretchen Lang were best friends on and off for 75 years, and there aren't many people who can say that. They weren't perfect. They didn't always get along. They screwed up. They acted like assholes. They fought. They fell out. They patched things up. They drove each other crazy, and they didn't make it to Haley's comet, but they tried. And it's so good. It's just like this beautiful portrait of the reality of friendship. But the movie did not end like that. The movie didn't end like that at all. It's like in the middle of the exorcism, she ends up stabbing Gretchen, and Gretchen runs away to this other house, and then the demon comes out of her, and it's this personified, weird looking little creature thing. And then Abby sets it on fire with a bottle of liquor and a lighter, and spitting the liquor out of her mouth, bursting it all into flames, and then it dies. And then they're like, whew, that's great. And then next scene, Gretchen's having to move away, so her family's packing the moving truck, and Abby comes to see her and say goodbye, and she's like, I think he's gone, I don't think he's gonna come back. And then that's it, that's the end of the movie. And then you get the thing where it rolls the credits and it shows you each character, and it pops up on the screen what happened in their life, and just tells you like, this person ended up launching this company, and this person ended up doing this, and Gretchen and Abby stayed friends over the years, and it was all happily ever after. And I'm like, no, that just doesn't have the same emotional impact. So that was the one big qualm that I had with the movie, as far as just like adapting from the source material. I really wish it would have stayed more true to the ending, because I really liked how the book wrapped up. And I do think if people just watch the movie, they aren't going to be as satisfied with that ending. It makes it feel all like light and silly, and kind of takes away some of the themes about friendship and the truth of it and the end of it. So I wasn't super happy with that. But overall, I did think the movie did a pretty good job adapting from the book. I had a good time with it. Again, this story is just not my personal favorite thing. It's just not fully resonating with me like it does for some people. But if you're interested in it, definitely recommend checking it out. If you want to just watch the movie, I definitely think you can do that without reading the book. If you want to just read the book and not watch the movie, you can do that too, I suppose. But yeah, that was how I felt about My Best Friend's Exorcism, the book and the movie. Let me know down in the comments if you've read the book or watched the movie, or if you've done both or one of them. Let me know. And let me know what you think about them, especially if you have both read the book and watched the movie. Let me know how you feel about the adaptation. And if you are gonna leave any spoilers in the comments, just be careful and try to do like a couple lines down and make a spoiler note so that people can know not to read the comment, not to get spoilers. But I would be interested in chatting spoilers with you if you do want to label that like that in the comments. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.